Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Torin here with another Warhammer Total War Online commentary. In this multiplayer ladder battle, I will be piloting the Dwarves, led by the Slayer King, Ungrim Ironfist, and I'll be facing off against an Empire opponent who is shrouded very heavily in the trees over there, so definitely going to be an interesting battle with all this terrain involved. So as far as my army composition goes, again, I like the Grudge Throwers a lot. They have slightly farther range than your traditional cannons, and also, on top of that, they are anti-infantry, which I feel is pretty good, especially against Empire. So definitely going to be my choice for artillery there. As far as my leadership goes, I actually have Ungrim with the Axe of Dargo and other standard abilities. I have a Runesmith who has the new Beastman DLC augmentation, so increased leadership, increased attack, and also increased missile defense, which is especially pertinent this game because my opponent decided to bring a lot of handgunners, like a lot. So that paid off quite well. Then I also have a Thane, and I have a second Thane back here. So I'm definitely a big fan of having two pairs of Thanes. Again, the fact that they can carry a healing potion and a potion of toughness is just so valuable. And then as far as the core of my army goes, I have a line of Longbeards in the front line. This is going to be my initial main group that will ideally engage with his front line and absorb the initial shock. I have a secondary group of Longbeards and auxiliary to plug in as needed. And then I also have a group of Slayers back here with their Mohawks getting ready for some action. So again, I like to have these just so I have some mobility. They do have 40 run speed, which, isn't bad by any means. Again, my other dwarf units have, 26, 28. They're all very slow. So, again, these guys are decent for chasing down handgunners, dealing with cavalry. Though, they're not ideal per se, but, they still get the job done. So, as far as my opponent's army composition goes, he is very well hidden back here. He has a Bright Wizard here, so definitely some Fireballs, Flaming Sword of Ruin, other abilities like that will be used. And he brought a lot of artillery, so he definitely has the artillery advantage on me, and he also is on a bit of a high ground here. So I'm having to march right into this, which is not fun. He also has a group of greatswords here, handgunners, and behind them more standard swordsmen. He has his General of the Empire. Again, the General of the Empire, I've seen a lot of people starting to favor the General rather than Karl Franz simply because he can carry potions. So definitely an interesting thing there. He has more handgunners back here, great swords, and then swordsmen. So essentially, he didn't actually bring any cavalry or other units like that. He just has a lot of siege units and a ton of handgunners and then a main line of great swords and swordsmen. So it should definitely be interesting, and we'll see how it pans out. Again, one of the weaknesses of the Dwarves is the lack of mobility, so I feel that cavalry are very, very good against them, but this particular battle was pretty good regardless. So without further ado, let's get started. So again, in this particular match, we are starting very far apart, and there is a large exploratory phase to this battle. So I'll go ahead and be fast-forwarding through a lot of this this setup here. So he's bringing his Bright Wizard, obviously, to get a little bit of harass. He starts off by shooting a Fireball, which I believe just ran right into this terrain here, because the Fireball does need to usually be shot from an angle that you have a direct line of sight. Preferably, if you have a flying Bright Wizard who's mounted in the air, he can shoot downwards and get a better slope there. So that's ideal. So that particular Fireball was a miss. And I just start shooting at him with my Grudge Thrower because, again, I didn't have line of sight on these other targets here. So really, I just, that was an optimal strategy for me. And again, I didn't know if he had cavalry at this point. And so something I would suggest is, I like to keep my Slayers, especially against the Empire, just by my artillery to protect them. Because if cavalry come, Reichsguard, or Demogryph Knights, who arc large units, the Slayers who have the anti-large and are going to be pretty good against them. So Slayers, I usually like to keep an auxiliary, and when I realize that there's no threat to my artillery, I then run them up to chase things down. So that's usually my 2 cents on that. I do finally get line of sight on his cannons, so there is a tree line here blocking them, but regardless, we start trading initial cannon fire, and the Grudge Throwers will do pretty good against Great Cannons. The Great Cannons, I don't recall the range off the top of my head, but it's actually 450, so slightly farther than the Grudge Throwers, which is definitely not good for me there. So again, I finally realized that his army's over here, so I came up and around, and I wanted to use this tree line here to give me some obstruction to his fire. And you can see some of his cannons are hitting the trees and aren't getting through to my main troops. But I am still taking decent cannon fire. My Grudge Throwers are putting a little pressure on these great cannons, but again, it's not enough to really shut them down. So what I do is as soon as I see his infantry line, and I did a pretty good amount of damage to those, I begin to actually shoot at his infantry, which I feel is a much better value. So I believe I start shooting at some of these swordsmen and other units here, and it pans out pretty well for me. I believe my Grudge Throwers over the course of the battle do quite well. So then my Corlers begin shooting at these swordsmen, which are a pretty good target, though they are shielded, so they will be fairly resilient against the missile fire. Again, the great swords probably would have been a slightly better target. I'm trying to remember where he brought those from. Yes, over there in the force. They are armored, but again, they're not shielded, so the Quarrelers will get in there. So I immediately turn the Quarrelers to shoot at these. And I try and back up, because again, he had a very aggressive posture, so I just wanted to get my battle line set and make sure that my Quarrelers would be as protected as possible. But again, he does have much more infantry than me, which is tough. I did invest heavily in my Lords, so I'm not going to have as much density with my infantry unit. So as far as our front line goes, the Longbeards are engaging with his swordsmen. That'll be a fairly even matchup. No huge advantage in one way or the other. But again, the greatswords will make pretty quick work of the Longbeard. So again, I saw them coming around here, the additional swordsmen, and he does bring these handgunners here, which is definitely tough. Handgunners, you know, they're not the most mobile unit, but they're very good against dwarves, because dwarves, I don't have cavalry to punish this play. You know, my only option would be to try and force some of these units through, and they'll take fire, and again, maybe with slayers I could chase them. So he gets to just posture up as he pleases and just start teeing off. Thankfully, Longbeards are armored and shielded and are very tough units, so hopefully they can take some of this handgunner fire that's about to happen. Unfortunately, I don't have enough troops to really stop these swordsmen from getting in, so I believe I actually pull a Thane here in a moment to help support that front line. I have one Thane here in the front, I have another one here, and his front line, because of these Thanes, is going to get beaten down pretty soundly. Thanes make a huge difference, especially in battles against swordsmen. Against greatswords, it's going to be a little closer. He did pull those greatswords over here, who are already shaken, actually. Those Longbeards are doing quite well, but unfortunately my Quarrelers did take a lot of damage. He pulled his General of the Empire. He does have that mobility advantage, and I did pull Ungrim to try and support over here and help out, and he's doing pretty good work against these swordsmen, and hopefully will pay off for me. So I was able to break his line with the use of the Thane and the Runesmith. They did pretty well right here in this part of the flank, and I immediately start chasing. So I send this group of Longbeards after this handgunner, and I send my Runesmith, who is unfortunately taking a ton of damage now. So definitely not the best play on my part. I probably should have sent the Thane instead and kept him with the army. But again, he was all I could really get off the main line, and he'll get in there and shut down this handgunner fire, and also use the Rune of Wrath and Rune, which is going to do a bit of damage, and will hopefully start to work on that guy. So he does get his Bright Wizard in there to fight. And I immediately start shooting with my Grudge Throwers at these guys. So the Grudge Throwers will do some pretty steady damage here and will hopefully pay off. So he does use the Cascading Fire Cloak here, which is good. Again, Ungrim is a very sturdy unit. He has 120 armor, so any armor piercing is going to be quite good. But I decided to just start chasing down these handgunners because, again, these swordsmen will not do enough damage to really punish Ungrim. But unfortunately, this missile fire will do enough to punish him. So I just keep chasing off these handgunners with my different units here. And the Runesmith and Ungrim, I thought that if they would stick together, they would last a little bit longer. And they are starting to do pretty good damage, and at least are forcing these guys to move, so they can't just sit and tee off. As far as the front line goes, my Longbeards here are doing quite well, and I quickly realized that he wasn't going to bring any cavalry. So now the Slayers are able to come up, and this is going to make the big difference in the battle. Once my Slayers got here, I actually had some mobility and was able to run around and pressure them a little more. These Longbeards over here were able to catch up with these handgunners and tie them down. And though they are quite damaged, I believe this is still an advantageous battle for them, that they will win. And over here again, these handgunners took quite a bit of damage, and this Runesmith is starting to get a little bit of damage into this Bright Wizard. But again, I don't have quite enough resources to really chase around these handgunners. But thankfully, my Grudge Throwers are starting to shoot them, and it's definitely paying off for me because, as you can see, these units are broken now, and I was very happy about that. So I get my Runesmith, and I attempt to chase down this group as well. And things are going pretty well in the main battle line. Again, these Longbeards are holding their own, and I do have the Thane in here, which is making the difference. He does have his General of the Empire, which I'm not sure where it was at this moment. I believe it was running around and chasing my Runesmith and Ungrim. So that was definitely tough. He does have that massive mobility advantage. But regardless, this front line's going well. The Thane over here is helping to win this flank, and even though he's surrounded, it doesn't really matter. Thanes have extremely high leadership, and he still hasn't even used his potions. So it's definitely he's going to be able to defeat these swordsmen and break them. And at the end of the day, even if the dwarves lose their army, their leaders and Thanes have such high leadership that they can usually survive. So now Ungrim is chasing off this group of handgunners. He finally got away from the battle, and he is going to give these guys the business. They won't do much, if any, damage to him now that he's engaged in melee. And my Runesmith actually did a really good job fighting off this Bright Wizard. Dwarf leadership, like I always mention, is very sturdy and very tough, especially with he was able to buff his own armor and damage resistance. And Ungrim is now just chasing around these handgunners and doing very, very good work to them. So things are going well. Again, my army looks very thin, and if you look at the army breakdown, I have 127 troops left. Thankfully, these Quarrelers were able to come back and start shooting to support over here. And look at these Longbeards. They're in like this awful circumstance, and they're still just fighting. And it's definitely a very, very cool unit. I really like Dwarvish Infantry. They just last forever. And now that most of the handgunners were relatively speaking dealt with, again, there's still, staggers here and there, but these Slayers were able to get through, and they're just cutting through these handgunners. Slayers are very good against handgunners. I mean, all right, they're not very good on paper, but the fact that they're fast and can catch them easily, I mean, look how much faster they are than these handgunners. They're able to just cut them to pieces. So I tend to use Slayers for these type of things, and Ungrim is taking care of that group over there. So that's really just leaving my opponent with just a few infantry groups, because he invested very heavily in artillery and handgunners, and now that they've all been taken offline, he basically just has these few groups of swordsmen who are set to deal with my Thanes, who, again, this guy's been fighting here for like 45 minutes, and he is still in really good health against great swords, against the General of the Empire was fighting them, but unfortunately he finally does chase down my runesmith here, who is not happy. Bright Wizard's doing pretty well, and his General of the Empire was supporting here, but I think he quickly realized that these two Thanes were going to beat that guy down, and he does realize that Ungrim is quite wounded. But regardless, Ungrim, even in this state, is going to be able to do pretty good against his General of the Empire, but he's just running around and trying to pick off, or cycle charge, which is very good when you're playing against Ungrim. If you have an open field, it's good to cycle charge, but Ungrim got a nice little hit there, but he should be able to last for a while. And again, Ungrim's leadership will never break, which is very awesome. So Ungrim definitely calls his bros over. He definitely needs some help, so these two Thanes are going to go help him out, and hopefully the three of them can tag team this General of the Empire down. But regardless, my opponent doing a very, very good job at cycle charging, and to be honest, there's not a lot I can do about that. Bright Wizard is here, and thankfully these Slayers, they pretty much cleaned up all of these handgunners over here, so now they're going to come back and help, and hopefully their speed will help me deal with these guys here. I do have my Quarrelers, who are still doing pretty good. He's had units come back from routing, and they've just been shooting at these guys here, and again, they could certainly make a difference if they're able to come back, but hopefully these guys will keep them from doing so. And these grudge throwers here are still shooting. Unfortunately, he is able to pull some swordsmen over here who will, if they do get there, they might be able to. Although even these dwarvish grudge throwers, I mean, the troops there aren't, in terrible shape, and they're pretty sturdy. So I immediately just send them after these guys, and they break them. Just the sight of these fearsome grudge thrower attendants here is going to chase them off, and they got those sweet face masks, and they're not going to take any shit. So very cool here. And yeah, it's a very pitched battle, very close. He still has his great cannons here. He relocated them, and I don't have a ton of mobile troops left, so it's hard for me to deal with him, and he's just getting free pot shots on these guys, which I should have spread out. But again, I was micromanaging a few things here, and I kind of lost track of them. So regardless, I just am chasing whatever I can catch, basically, because again, oh, he just took out his own guy there. That's rough. So I can't catch his mounted leadership, and immediately the Slayers, they see the danger over here in the forest, so they're going to go over there and hopefully be able to do pretty good work. And I figure that this is kind of where the final battle will take place. That's the last pocket of resistance he really has. I mean, he has some swordsmen here, but these guys, their leadership is so low that they'll break, as soon as, they get near Ungrim or those other units. And pretty much the core of his army is these cannons. He has his Bright Wizard, who is going to chase down these guys, unfortunately. And then he also has his General of the Empire, who I believe has already used his potions. So very close battle here. So I'll fast forward a little bit, because again, this can take a while for these guys with their short legs to get over here. So the Slayers finally do collapse on these cannons and are able to get in there and just make short work of these guys. Slayer's definitely superior infantry, and he does bring his General of the Empire, realizing that these cannons are high value. And he does bring some great swords, actually, who I wasn't aware of, but look how low their leadership is. If they take any more losses, they're just going to rout. Now they're at 2 leadership, and these Slayers do not care. They're pretty healthy for the duration of this battle, and they know that their bros are coming. With they're not quite as fast as Slayers, and unfortunately Ungrim is taking some heavy cannon fire from that. So I pan him out to the right, and I wanted to split him off from the Thanes, and as you can see, I split all 3 of these units now, which I should have done much earlier, but again, I was focusing on my Slayers here. But the Slayers were able to rout these great swords, and they're still fighting and just getting into these cannons, trying their best. But again, there are a lot of cannoneers here, so it's not going to be as easy to shut them down until my leadership gets there. He does bring his General of the Empire, and unfortunately the Slayer King does fall. But these Thanes, the dwarves are all about vengeance, so they're definitely pissed off, and they're going to claim some vengeance. And you can look, even despite that, his leadership's 43. He has taken a bit of damage. That's still really good, considering the circumstances. And this guy is rocking 65 leadership, and all of these Empire units are, pretty rattled and frazzled from it all. And again, Those grudge thrower attendants were able to do well. These quarrelers here are still chasing off units, and those cannoneers or grudge thrower attendants were able to actually deal with that bright wizard and chase him off the battlefield. So very, very happy about that. And he does have some troops back here, but once these Thanes get in here, it's pretty much game over for him, because his general of the Empire is not going to be able to take both of these guys. And I actually had a potion still on the other guy, on my Thane here, so now they're both full health. That is a huge wall of health and attack power and stats to get through for my opponent. And, you know, what does he have left? A few groups of swordsmen. These guys would get absolutely crushed by those Thanes. So definitely, I'll fast forward here a little bit, because, again, a lot of this is chasing. This was a very long, close battle. But I really like the Dwarven leadership, and I really like overloading them on them. So definitely a very, very close battle there. As far as the army composition goes, the Thanes did really well, and Ungrim and even the Runesmith. He got isolated a little bit against those handgunners, but he was the only unit I could really peel away from the front line, because we collapsed that flank, so he did well. Again, Longbeards, very, very good. They were taking a ton of handgunner fire, and having the shielded Longbeards was very good. And the Slayers, I can't tell you guys enough how good Slayers are in almost every matchup. Very underrated unit. I don't see a lot of Dwarf players using them, and I personally think Slayers are one of the best units in their roster. They're fast, they're mobile, and even though they're anti-large, they still do really good against other infantry and other ground troops, so very solid there. The Quarrelers, they did their piece, but, you know, again, the Empire had a little more flexibility in terms of overall troop density, and they were able to get some good surrounds. And the Grudge Throwers fought most of the battle, and even the Grudge Cannon Dwarves were able to fight and drive off a Bright Wizard, so very good value out of that. As far as my opponent's army composition goes, the swordsmen weren't a bad choice. The great swords, I think perhaps if he had, you know, gotten rid of 2 groups of swordsmen and, you know, tried to get another group of great swords in there, and then perhaps gone a little lighter on the handgunners, I think 4 was a little excessive. And maybe get some cavalry. If he had like a Demogryph Knight that could have swept in earlier and, you know, killed my Grudge Throwers earlier, he could have just been cycle flanking my leadership and just knocking them through the air. You guys saw how effective that General of the Empire was at doing that, so, you know, I think having some cavalry presence, even just some Reichsguard, would have been really good. So, really good game to Faker over here. Appreciate the game. It was very close and it was a lot of fun. So, look forward to seeing you again on Ladder. And thanks, guys, for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And there will be a lot of content coming out in the next few days. I just played a lot of games, so definitely a lot of material there. Thanks again, guys, and have an excellent night. Take care.